Hello, and welcome to Foundations for Algebra, Unit 3A, Lesson 10. Today's objective is scholars will solve problems using the Pythagorean Theorem. So, just as a reminder, you should be filling in your copy of the notes as we go. We're going to find the missing length of the triangle. So the first thing we have to do when looking at this triangle, first we know that we're going to be using Pythagorean Theorem, which is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. We're going to show all of our work. The first thing we have to do is decide which side is missing. So I know that the side across from my right angle is my hypotenuse. My hypotenuse is always going to be over here on the other side of my equal sign. So in this case, I have 8 squared plus 6 squared equals c squared. Well, I know 8 squared is 64. 6 squared is 36 equals c squared. 64 plus 36 is 100. 100 equals c squared. In order to solve this, we are going to take the square root of both sides. So the square root of 100 equals the square root of c squared. So the square root of 100 is simply 10. It could be positive or negative. But since we're talking about the length of the side of a triangle, it must be the positive number. So I know 10 equals c. So remember, try about taking the square root of a square. We just get the answer back. Okay, so let's try another one. Here, again, we're finding the missing leg, or missing length. Again, I'm going to draw an arrow so I can see that 13 is my hypotenuse. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. I know a is 5 centimeters, so I have 5 squared plus b squared equals 13 squared. Well, 5 squared is 25, plus, we're just going to leave that b squared, equals 13 squared is 169. So now we're going to subtract 25 from both sides. So I have to subtract 25 over here and over here. Over here, these are going to cancel, so I'm left with b squared equals, when I subtract 25 over here, I get 144. So now I'm going to take my square root of both sides, and I get b equals 12. Again, it could be positive or negative, but because we're talking about side lengths, it must be positive. Okay. Again, this is why it's so important that first thing we do is look for where our right angle is. Here's my right angle. Across from it is that one right there. So that's my side C. So again, I have a squared, I'm just going to use the a that they gave me, plus 2.1 squared equals 2.9 squared. Well, we can use our calculators here. And I know 2.1 squared gives me, so I have a squared plus 2.1 squared is 4.41 equals, and then when I do 2.9 squared, I get 8.41. So next, I am going to subtract the 4.41 from both sides. So this gives me a squared equals 4, because these are going to cancel. Well, square root of both of these, a equals 2. So now let's look at this one. Here's my right angle. Here's the side across my right angle. That means this is my side C. So I have 15 squared plus b squared equals 25 squared. Well, 15 squared is 225 plus b squared equals 25 squared is 625. So I'm going to subtract 225 from both sides because I'm finding a missing leg here. These are going to cancel. Over here, I get 400. So I have b squared equals 400. Take the square root of both sides, and I get b equals 20. This isn't so hard to do. All you have to do is figure out which side you're finding first. Okay, so your friend finds the missing length of the triangle. Is your friend correct? Explain your reasoning. So here's the triangle my friend found. We have a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So they did 8 squared plus 12 squared equals c squared. 8 squared was 64, 12 squared was 144, so they got 208 equals c squared. Then they took the square root, so they said c is the square root of 208. Pause this and think about that for a second. Okay, hopefully you paused it. So the first thing we've done in every other one was we have drawn an arrow from our right angle to our hypotenuse. So in this case, we know our hypotenuse is 12 centimeters. Remember, that's our side C. We have the other side 8. So did they solve this correctly? No, because look at what they did. They solved like the 12 was down here at the bottom instead of being over here. So they should have solved the problem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared by saying, okay, a squared or b squared, whatever, plus 8 squared equals 12 squared. Because remember, that is side C. So if we do that, we get a squared plus 64 equals 144. We subtract the 64 from both sides. Here it cancels. Over here I get 80. So I have a squared equals 80. So I take the square root of both sides. I get a equals the square root of 80. Which if I did it approximately, it would be 8.9. I'm sure it'd be 8.9. Okay, if I actually did that, but it's exactly the square root of 80. So it's very important that you realize square root of 80 and the square root of 208 are very far apart. It's very important that you check to make sure that you're finding the correct side of your triangle. So let's look at this one now. We have to find x. So I can see my right triangle here, and I can see that I'm finding side C of my right triangle. But I seem to be missing a number here. So I know this bottom is 21 yards. And this over here is 20 yards. I'm not sure why they gave me this thing. What you need to know is these little hash marks on all of these sides mean that all of these are the same measure. They're all the same length. This is a shorthand way of saying they're all the same length. If I have 4 that they're all the same length, that means that that's a square. That means I know that this right here is also 20 yards. So I can do this. I'm finding my hypotenuse. So I've got 20 squared plus 21 squared equals c squared. Pause your video and solve this. Okay, so if you have any questions about how I solved this, you should have gotten the answer of 29. If you have any questions, look back at the work I showed. Okay, so now let's look at this, going around. The direct path I usually take to work has a large pothole. So you can see, here is the direct path I usually take to work. It has a large pothole on it. The direct path is 18.5 miles. You can see that there. In order to avoid the pothole, I drive 15 miles and then turn east. So I'm going to drive south 15 miles. So here we go, driving south 15 miles. Here it is. And then I'm going to turn east. And then I turn east. So here's my east. So I have two questions here. How far do I need to drive east to get to my destination? And then how many more miles do I have to drive to go around this pothole? Okay, so first thing we need to find is figure out how far I need to drive east. So this is my hypotenuse here. That's my direct path to work. So I know that if I have 15 miles squared plus whatever, they call this x squared, equals 18.5 squared. Well, 15 squared is 225 plus x squared equals, let's see what 18.5 squared is. I'm just going to put that in my calculator because I really don't know what that is. It's going to give me 342.25. So now I'm going to subtract 225 from that. So subtract 225 from both sides. If here is get canceled out, I'll be left with x squared equals. Over here, I get 117.25. So the square root of 117.25 gives me approximately, and we're round to the nearest tenth, 10.8. So that means this down here is 10.8 miles. So that's how far I need to drive east. The second question asks, how many more miles do I have to drive to go around this pothole? Well, my original path, I'm going to do this one in red. So my original path was 18.5. My new path is 15 miles plus 10.8 miles. So I have 15 plus 10.8 gives me 25.8 miles. My original drive was 18.5, so I'm going to subtract that 18.5. That gives me a 3. And then that gives me a 7. So I'm having to drive an extra 7.3 miles to go around this pothole. Okay? So make sure you answer both parts. Part A, which is how far do I have to drive, and then part B. Okay? Last one. Can a right triangle have a leg that is 10 meters long and a hypotenuse that is 10 meters long? So I want you to think about that. My right triangle has a leg that is 10 meters long and a hypotenuse that is 10 meters long. Can that be true? Well, that would mean that this x over here could be, so I have 10 squared plus x squared equals 10 squared. So 100 plus x squared equals 100. So I subtract the 100 from both sides. I get x squared equals 0. Well, I can take the square root of that. X equals 0. Can I have a triangle with a side length of 0? No, I can't. So I definitely cannot have a right triangle with a leg that is 10 meters long and a hypotenuse that is 10 meters long also. Because the other side would have to be 0, and then it wouldn't be a triangle. It would be an angle. Because it wouldn't have that third side. Okay, so go ahead and work on these in class, and I will see you there. Bye.